Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Hugh Sung. I am an assistant with the Oral History Program on board the Battleship New Jersey here in Camden, New Jersey. Today is Saturday, October 14th, 2017, and our interview guest today is Marvin Minor from what city?
Tuolumne,
Okay,
California.
California? Okay. Oh, welcome back home, Mr. Minor.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service. Is this your first time back on board since you left?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Once again, welcome aboard. So, Marvin Minor, you are a Navy veteran who served on this ship. What years did you serve?
1968 to 1969.
Okay. What is your current age?
My current age is 71.
Okay. And when did you enlist?
I enlisted in April '65.
Okay. How old were you when you joined the Navy?
18.
Okay. Now, let's open up this interview by giving a little introduction of yourself, like where you're from, what inspired you to get into the Navy. We'll begin. Please remove your hat so we can see you better.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's start with about yourself.
Yeah, I joined the Navy. Where I'm from is Salinas, California. I was born and raised there. Joined the Navy basically on a whim. A friend had just joined ahead of me, and I went over to see what it was like and joined.
Okay, was that your inspiration?
Yeah,
Okay. Anything else inspired you to join?
not really, no.
Okay, so explain details about getting to the Navy. Like, where'd you go for boot camp? What would you like? Any stories or experiences you'd like to share?
Boot camp, San Diego, A school in Chicago, B school, Philadelphia. I was thought I was going to be in the Naval Air Station for a while. I did serve the NAS Guam for 18 months. And I was master at arms there. And then I had a choice of duty stations. New Jersey was going to be recommissioned, and I requested that. And that's how I got aboard from New Jersey. Anything else?
Okay, so you said boot camp was in San Diego,
Mm-hmm.
and was it A school you mentioned?
A school was in Chicago.
Chicago? Okay.
And then B school was here in Philadelphia.
Okay, and your first rate was Master at Arms?
Well, I was master. I was always a VT, but the master at arms was a position I held at NAS Guam. I mean, it was actually the shore police for the Navy on Guam.
Okay, so describe the VT rate.
Oh, the VT, we maintained the boilers. Also, we like to say if it wasn't for the VTs, the ships wouldn't eat, sleep, have lights, or fire their guns, or go anywhere.
Okay, any experiences from boot camp, A or B school you'd like to share?
No, they just prepared the boot camp, prepared me for the Navy, and then the A school helped me with the beginning part of the boilers. And the A schools, basically they just added to A school and helped me make my rates.
Okay, so the first ship you were signed on was the New Jersey, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You saw her during her recommissioning ceremony?
Oh yeah, I was on board the day after they moved her from dry dock in Philadelphia.
Any first impressions when you saw her?
Large, very big, and even bigger when she was out of the water.
Okay. Now, the Vietnam War was at its height during that time.
Mhm.
Do you remember the sentiment? Like the people around you, what were they talking about?
They were, it was mixed. A lot of people were against the war, a lot of people were for the war, and it was kind of mixed. If you were in the military, you were probably for the war. I didn't have a sentiment really either way. I was in the Navy and would go where they told me to.
All right. So New Jersey was big, impressive. Any other reactions?
No, it was, at first sight, it was, it looked like it was a big place. Then once you get out in the ocean, it got a little smaller.
Okay. So when you came on board, did you remember meeting Captain Snyder?
Captain Snyder was not the captain when I came aboard.
Oh, he wasn't?
Captain, I think it was Pendleton, I think, was the interim captain for the original commissioning. Then Captain Snyder didn't come aboard until about a month or so after I came aboard.
Okay. But you never met either captain, have you?
Excuse me?
You never met either of the captains?
I know Captain, I don't know him, I've met him several times, Captain Snyder.
Okay. How was he?
He was easygoing, was always down the mess deck seeing how everything was going, or he would even sometimes come down your fire room and check that out. From what I understand by some history I've heard about him, he was an engineering officer on several other battleships earlier, so he knew his way around the engine spaces.
Okay. So when the ship went out of Philadelphia into the sea, do you remember your first port?
Our first port was Newport News, Rhode Island.
Anything you remember there?
No, because all we did was drop off some yard workers that we took from Philadelphia, did some last minute things with something on the ship. Then we let them off. We let them off, got underway, and went down to Panama.
Okay. Could you describe going through the Panama Canal?
Panama Canal was hot, humid. The ship, when we were sitting in Cologne, we were looking at the specs for the canal, and the canal is 108 feet wide. This battleship is 108 3/4 inches wide. When the hell did you get through? Well, the canal is rubber lined, and they actually had to pull us through, and when we got to the other side, they had to repaint the ship.
So the ship did scrape the sides, right?
Both sides, yes.
But you said there were rubber linings.
Well, the canal has got a rubber lining on it, and they actually, with the trains or train engines, they pulled us through, and actually pulled us right through it, with both sides rubbing the canal.
And it was enough to take off some paint.
Yeah.
Sure, that was an experience. Okay. Anything else during the canal transition?
Not in the canal. We most of the times if you were in engineering spaces, we would relieve each other once in a while to go see what was going on. But most of the time you were down in the fire room.
Okay, so even though you're deep inside the ship, you did have a chance to come out and see it, right?
Yeah, we had opportunity, but you had to be relieved to do that. You just didn't go up topside.
Okay. Any other ports you've been to before heading to Hawaii? What was Hawaii next?
No, we went to Long Beach, where we were home ported in Long Beach. Did a refitting there. Then we went to Hawaii from that. We started deploying Westpac.
Okay, so Westpac, is that like an exercise?
Westpac is the deployment to the West Pacific,
Okay,
and actually that's Vietnam, Philippines, Japan, that area.
okay. Any other ports you remembered, port of calls that stand out?
After
Or either one, whether...
after Hawaii.
Yes.
Oh, we went to many places. We went to Hong Kong, Subic Bay for sure, several times. That was kind of our home port when we got to Westpac. Japan, Yokosuka, Japan. Went down to Australia, New Zealand, and Pango Pango. Some of those Pango Pango was just a fuel stop. Is all it was. It wasn't no Liberty stop. But enjoy all Singapore. Went to Singapore. That was interesting. You had to anchor out at Singapore because there was no port. So we took boats into Singapore. Spent a leave there of 3 days. So it was, that's the ports that we hit. Then we were always going to the gun line in South Vietnam.
Okay. Did you have a favorite port?
Favorite port, my favorite port would probably be Hong Kong. It was just a variety of stuff to do.
Okay. So after that, you went to the firing line, right?
Yeah, go the firing line between each one of those ports. And we go for R&R to the ports. But we went to the gun line about every month.
Okay, so what was daily life as soon as you got to the gun line?
A daily life,
Yeah.
sleep, stand watch, eat, sleep, stand watch.
Yeah.
I've gone as long as on the battleship, as long as about 60 days without ever seeing the sunlight. Get off watch, go up in the fantail at night and see the stars or whatever, and then go down and do track.
Okay. So let's talk about leisure. Any like games you remember playing with the other sailors?
Oh, we play poker. Mostly. Sometimes you play pinochle. But just the leisure time was just being off, and you could go on deck, sunbathe if you wanted to, or things like this. As long as you weren't firing turret 3. You couldn't go forward of midships most days because they were firing either turret 1 or turret 2, but the fantail was always open.
Okay. You remember the food on board?
Yeah. We always had good food. It was, the cooks we had were like Mom would make. It was pretty good food. We never had any bad food that I can remember. One of the chief in charge of the mess hall, we had Wednesday nights for ethnic night. And so the different ethnics and ethnicity on the ship would request a food for the ethnic night. We had several request chitlins one time, and he said I would get them as long as you clean them. And so they had chitlins, and most of the rest of us had cold sandwiches for that night. You had an option, either eat what was cooked or cold cuts on Wednesday nights.
All right. This was only Wednesday, correct?
Excuse me?
This was only on Wednesdays?
Only on Wednesday nights, yeah, or Wednesday evening meal. And then on mid-rats, that was for the midnight watches going on and off midi. You have whatever's left over from breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
Okay. You remember what was sold in the gift shops?
What was sold in the gift shop.
Oh, the ship store. I think that's what they call it.
The ship store is what it's called.
Yes.
Yeah, cigarettes, toiletries, cigars. I bought several boxes of cigars through there. You could buy lighters and just stuff that you needed on board, like sewing kits. You might run out of thread because you did sew your own clothes back then. You couldn't give them to your mom or somebody to repair something. You had to take care of yourself. There was a soda machine we had that the soda wasn't all that great. It was Coke, but it didn't taste real well. But you could buy stuff like that. Not a lot of stuff other than what you might need on board.
You remember any snacks or candies that were sold?
No, I do not remember any candies being sold in the ship store.
Okay. Because that was a question that a lot of staff members here were always wondering, but a lot of vets barely talk about it. I guess it's something that they usually didn't go for.
No, we never had. I don't ever remember any like Hershey's or things like that on board.
Okay. Anything else you remember for leisure activities on the ship?
Well, the ship made its own bread after we'd been at sea for a while. But you always get in touch or make friends with one of the cooks, especially one of the bakers. And we always had fresh bread in the forward fireroom, and jelly and peanut butter, because I knew one of the cooks. And before I'd come on watch, I'd go get a loaf of bread and a can of peanut butter and a can of jelly, and we'd go down in the fire room on watch and have bread and peanut butter for him while he was on watch.
All right, so let's go to duties on the ship. Do you remember the ship refueling at sea or replenishing at sea?
Oh yeah, I was always in the fire room. No, what happens when you're refueling is there's so many sounding tanks, sounding tubes, and most of if you weren't on watch, you'd be on that crew, especially at sea. Now in port it wasn't so bad, but at sea, every tank had to have a sounder, and so they would pull the mostly enlisted guys off the fire room crews, and the petty officers would fill in, and they would take care of the sounding of the tubes, and we would run the ship while we were underway. And then we were undone, we'd go back to regular watches.
All right. And you got to see it when you were relieved from the boilers, right?
Excuse me?
You got to see all this as soon as you were relieved from the boilers, correct?
We didn't, because we were the ones that were relieving the watch. When you refuel, it's all hands. Same thing with taking on food stores, ammunition, things like this. It's all hands. So if you weren't on a working party, you were standing watch, and we would always rather stand watch. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I just overheard your life equator say you were a petty officer, that's all.
Yeah, I was a second class petty officer, and we didn't do working parties.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to talk about that?
No, it was always hectic because you're alongside of another ship and doing about 12 knots, and it was just watching steam, watching the bell, make sure that you reacted quick enough if something was to happen, and they called for a fullback or a flank, and you was always ready for something to go wrong.
Okay. I remember you mentioned earlier you were Master at Arms.
Yeah.
Do you remember any duties that you did while you were there?
Master at Arms, there was 14 of us, and so I stood one duty 24-hour day every 13 days. And but our duties were we were basically in charge of all the actually the police work for the island of Guam, except for the Air Force Base. And so we would be called out for fights, for drunks, people get lost, people don't, somewhere where they didn't belong, we'd come and get them and take them most of the time back to their ship, or we would pick up an Air Force guy and take him back to the Air Force Base at the gate, and they would pick him up from there. But as for the Navy, we were basically the police force for the Navy on Guam.
Okay. You were armed, right?
No.
Oh, you weren't?
We had a billy club, is all we had.
Okay.
Yeah, we were only armed if we were going to some place to where we knew we were going to have a problem.
Okay. And you said you were never armed, right?
No, I never had to wear a sidearm.
All right. I overheard some vets say that they were armed with empty rifles.
We had available to us was a .45. We didn't have rifles with us.
Okay. They said they were holding them as a deterrent. They weren't expected to shoot.
We had them in a safe in the office, and so if we were out and haven't come across something we needed a firearm for, we didn't have a firearm. You just handled it yourself.
Okay. All right, so back on the ship. Describe your duties as a VT.
VT, okay. I stood watches, made sure that everything was going well in forward fire room. I did number one fire room and had several guys working for me. There are 3 levels there. There's the check level, there's a firing level, and then there's machinery level. And down the machinery level, there was actually machinist mates they were in B division. And so I just made sure everything worked fine, made decisions, even when I wasn't on watch, about things going on in the fire room. But most of the time I had a first class that would tell me what he wanted, and I would, myself and a couple other second class, would get the job done, from repairing equipment to just standing watches.
All right. So you were petty officer second class, right?
Yes,
And you would answer to a petty officer first class?
yes.
Okay. Uh, Describe the noise, the smell, or anything you remember down the engineering spaces.
Hot. We were just in the second, number 2 fire room, and it was about 80 degrees in there. And it would run between 105, 110 degrees down in the fire room all the time. The noise was constant, high pitch. Even on the check level, which is the upper level of the fire room, you would still hear the noise, the high-pitched noise, up on even above the boiler. You got used to it. You could actually listen to the noises that the equipment made and see if it was even malfunctioning sometimes, or it was going to malfunction. Because just you get used to hearing the noises. They become ambient after a while.
There was no ear protection, was there?
No.
No?
We didn't wear gloves, turning valves. We didn't wear earplugs. We didn't wear any kind of hearing protection at all. The only one that really had hearing protection was the messenger on sound-powered phones, and the burnerman had sound-powered phones.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about down the engineering spaces?
No, it was just, I enjoyed working down there. I'm kind of mechanically inclined anyway, and being down where the actual things were happening as far as propulsion goes, I enjoyed being down there and working with the guys I work with.
Okay. Now, what about the ship and the gun line? Talk about the ship firing, whether the 60-inch guns, the 5-inch guns.
Yeah, it was depending on what was called. We'd fired a lot of 5-inch, and we were called to do quite a bit of 16, but the majority was 5-inch. I remember one time we went up, they had bombed this mountain in northern Vietnam, just below the DMZ, I think. Anyway, there's this river. But anyways, they bombed this mountain, and B-52s had bombed it. They shot rockets at it, all kinds of things, and really couldn't penetrate the mountain at all. So they called on us to go up this river. I don't even remember the name of the river. And we went to general quarters. And I didn't go on top, so I was at general quarters, but I talked to guys that were manning the 50 calibers. We had 50 calibers, 5-inch, and 16s when I was on board. And they were manning the 50 calibers. And we were in the jungle. We were actually kicking up mud with the screws up to where this mountain was. We get a shot at this mountain, and we had spotters, we had aircraft spotters, and 16 started firing. The two forward 16 started firing. They fired for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then we started full back down, backing out of the river. And it was about 2.5 hours before we could go from full back down to like a half to get out of the river. So we pulled in forward and backed out through the back. And the mountain, from what I understand, it collapsed on itself from all the explosions inside, and we destroyed the mountain.
Also, probably triggered some secondary explosions in the mountain.
Yeah, it was ammunition and things like this inside the mountain that we set off by shooting 16-inch shells inside.
Wow.
We were actually putting shells inside the tunnels.
Okay, so putting shells in the tunnels, destroyed them.
Yeah.
You ever hear about different ammunition being fired, whether it's armor piercing or high capacity rounds? Did you switch ammunition when you're shooting at these mountains, like from high capacity to arm piercing?
I don't know what they did up there. That's the gunner's mate. We called them cannon cockers, and they called us snipes.
Oh, okay. Now, describe what it's like when those guns go off.
If you're on deck, there are 3 UGAs It's like a, no, I don't know, just like a flugelhorn on an old Model A or something like that. And there was actually 3 of them, but you never heard the 3rd one because the gun would fire at that time. So you were always, you could hear the 3, you could hear 2, and you knew that the gun was going to fire. So if you had a camera and you want to take a picture of a bullet, you just click the shutter, and that when you think that 3rd Uga was going to go off, and 9 times out of 10 you get a bullet either coming out of the barrel or just getting ready to leave the barrel. And if you watched it, you could watch the bullet go over the horizon. It was noisy. It wasn't a pop. It was a roar. And it was, you didn't really feel any, like if you shot a 5-inch, you'd feel the concussion when they fired the 5-inch. But the 16s is a roar, a lot of smoke. Early on, when they were using the black powder, there was a lot of fire. So you get a little bit of heat when you were watching it. But as far as hurting your ear roar, it was just a roar. And you were always ready for it when you heard it. It was always impressive to watch it, watch the gun fire that much firepower at one time. And even one gun was very impressive. I've seen video. I've never actually witnessed a 3-gun fire of a turret, or let alone a 9-inch, because a 9-gun. Because a 9-gun, you were always at general quarters. But I've only witnessed the feeling of those. Then, and the ship wouldn't shake. It would kind of give. It wouldn't shake or it wouldn't roll or anything. It would just like absorbing, like an absorbing give to the whole ship. And when the guns went off, when the big guns went off. Now the 5-inch, they were just, you could hear them if you was on watch, and they would pop like a backfire down the engine rooms.
Okay, so you heard all this when you were down the engine room,
Oh, yeah.
right?
You could actually, you're more than hearing, you were actually feeling the vibrations, especially the 5-inch.
So down there, the 5-inch is actually vibrating more, right?
Right. Yeah, the 16s were pretty steady.
Okay. Now, you talked about what sailors would do in the mess decks when the guns fired. You don't mind describing that?
Oh, yeah. Wow. When we first got on board, we didn't know either. But after the gun, turret 3 is the mess decks are wrapped around turret 3. The kitchen or the galley, the mess decks are after turret 3. And they would always fire, if they were firing on the gun line, the turret 3 was the gun they fired when the crew was eating. So you learn to protect your tray and your cup. You had a tray and a porcelain cup that you drank out of. After the first time the gun fired, you learned that you put the tray on the ground, on the table, hooked your thumb in the tray, and covered your cup with your hand. So when the gun went off, your tray didn't jump off the table, and your cup didn't either turn over or the paint or whatever's in the ceiling come down in whatever you were drinking. We never told this to the new guys. They had to learn on their own. And it was always fun to watch the new guys because they would get all this paint in their food and they wouldn't eat anymore. So we would go and see what we liked off their tray and take it and eat it.
I'm sure that was a fun experience.
Relieve the watch. On deck, section 3. Relieve the watch.
Yeah, don't mind the one I'm saying.
Yeah. When you were in heavy seas, even the battleship would roll. And I've been up and seen actual water in the 012 deck on this ship. We were going into a typhoon. But we were getting some rough water and the ship would roll, and if you just left your tray on the table there in the mess decks, it would slide off the table. So there's a little trick to keeping your tray on the table in front of you. 2 pieces of bread, put them down on the table, and then squeeze your tray down on top of these 2 pieces of bread, and it's like gluing your tray to the table, and then you could eat without having to worry about that tray sliding around. Because if it slid one way, your buddy next to you would eat some of your food. So you always maintain that tray being in front of you.
Sure, that was an interesting experience. All right, so anything else you want to talk about with the guns firing?
I have experienced being on, like I said before, when they fired the 916s on one side, especially the first time. We were out in the Atlantic, and they were actually see if the guns would work or not. And we went to general quarters, and they actually fired a full 9-gun salvo. And we were aware of what it was, because the 1MC was cut in for that evolution, and you could actually feel where you were sitting or where you were standing. The ship moved sideways when they fired all 9 guns at one time at one side, and it didn't really roll the ship, but it would. You could actually feel the ship move sideways in the water, and that was an experience, especially the first time.
Okay. Now, there was one engagement which happened February of 1969 when this ship was firing nonstop from like 0100 to, I think, 0600 hours.
Yeah.
Do you remember that engagement?
Yeah, I was on duty in Fort Byram, and main control called and said they had a target that I think they were Army were being overrun.
Yeah. Supposedly Oliver North was on the other line.
He may have been. I don't
Yeah.
know who was on that other line. All I know is we were called for fire support because there was nothing available, and other than the New Jersey. And they, anyways, from what I understand from talking to people on the radio that I've talked to that were on communications with the Army guys, were they requested artillery or airstrike, and nothing was available. So they said, this is right if we got on the line the first time. And so they said, well, they didn't tell them who was going to fire for them, but they told them, well, we've got a gun ready for you, so give your coordinates. So the Army guys gave us coordinates of where they wanted. The people here on the ship told the Army guys, move back 200 yards. And they were going, why? And they said that the gun platform said to move back 200 yards. So they went ahead and complied with that. And we fired our first round. And over the radio, whoever was spotting for us said, what the hell was that? And then they said, they asked for a couple more 16-inch. We fired a couple more 16-inch projectiles or whatever we were firing at, and they said that was taken care of. But they were getting overrun by the North Vietnamese until we fired some 16-inch rounds for them, and then after that we sent a helicopter out and picked them up and brought them aboard the ship for a couple of days. Gave them hot food and cleaned their uniforms for them, and then also they even did a form like, here you can go on the beach and another guy can come. So they kind of made a swap with duty stations for a couple of days, and some of the guys on the ship got to go where these Army guys were in place, and then the Army guys got to stand their watches for them here on the ship. So it was 2 or 3 days, just relaxation. And for those guys, I think it was a good break for them. And then they got to see exactly what was firing for them. And I have a picture of myself and one of the Army guys that Neil Lifer took on the after turret, sitting on the barbette.
You say you had the photograph?
It's in the cruise book, the middle cruise book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's about a half page. And I don't have the actual photograph. I wish I had.
Okay.
But I do have the book.
Well, it might be something we might be able to find. Maybe we can look for it.
Yeah, I never thought of that, yeah.
Okay.
We did have, I don't know if you're going to ask this question now, we did have while we were on the gun line. Bob Hope came aboard. That was interesting. We each division was able to have an escort for one of the ladies, and not Anne Margaret.
I heard she was on board.
She was. We had the Anne Margaret, Bob Hope, of course. Then we had Les Brown with his band, and then there was the Rockettes, part of them, and the Gold Diggers. There was another group. So each division got to have an escort for one of the ladies with their ship, and I got to do an escort for a couple hours.
Okay, yeah, that was something I was going to ask.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You remember meeting any of these celebrities in person?
I had met Anne Margaret. Anne Margaret actually ate on the mess decks. In fact, in the cruise book, she's eating a piece of cake on the crew mess decks. I didn't get to talk to her, shook her hand, but didn't get to really talk to her. They were everybody was friendly and quite cordial, even though they were celebrities.
Okay. Now about Captain Snyder, do you remember the swimming pool he had on the 01 level?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It was a joke at first, and it was always full of water, but it was seawater. It wasn't fresh water. If you know anything about Navy ships, the fresh water goes to the boilers first, and you don't have time to have a freshwater bathtub or a freshwater swimming pool anywhere. But it was always full of water. Anybody could go in there if they wanted to. Usually too cold, or you were standing watches, didn't have time. The only person I ever saw in there, or even seen in a picture of, was Captain Schick. He did take a dip once.
Captain Snyder.
Right. Captain Snyder. Captain Schick is another captain of mine on a cruiser.
Okay. Anything else you remember when you were on the New Jersey?
Oh, just that it was always something going on. I know that during the daytime, especially if we were off the gun line, there was a lot of sunbathing going on, or guys would even get together, and we had a band. I don't know if they played anywhere besides on the New Jersey, but you could go on the fantail and listen to them have a jam session. And but that was just something to break up the monotony of eating, watch, and sleeping.
Okay. Now, you came back on the New Jersey, back to, was it Long Beach, California?
Yes.
Okay. And then you got the word that the ship was going to be decommissioned?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any reactions from the crew?
We were all disappointed. Sad would be too light. We were disappointed and upset that we only was going to make one cruise on the battleship.
Okay. The official word supposedly was economy,
Yeah.
although I've heard that it was a political reason.
I've heard both ways, the economy and political. Being just a sailor, you don't have the option to question either one of them. I do know that it's expensive to run the battleship, like $1 million a day.
Okay. So you left New Jersey, and then you got transferred to another ship, right?
Yeah, I went to the Arnold J. Isbell for one cruise. I got on board it was a tin can. The day I got aboard, she left the next day for Westpac. I did a Westpac cruise, which was gun line, Philippines, and back home again. So I was on her a little over 6 months, and then was transferred to the commissioning crew of the USS Warden, which was a DLG.
Okay, and your rate was the same the whole time, right?
Right, I was second class.
All right, second class BT?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other ships?
That's the three.
Okay. And then you were back to shore duty, correct?
No, I got out of the Navy in Japan. The The warden we commissioned it in Bath, Maine, brought it around to Long Beach, and did our sea trials in Long Beach, and our missile qualifications in Long Beach. But we just home ported in Long Beach, and then all of a sudden they decided to forward deploy a battle group, which the USS Midway was the carrier of the battle group. So we were forward deployed in Japan, and that's where I got out of the Navy. I flew home to Treasure Island, California, from Japan, and was discharged in Treasure Island.
All right, Treasure Island, San Francisco?
Yes,
Okay, so that was the end of your Navy career.
that was it.
Okay. Any comparisons or contrasts you want to make between the New Jersey and the other two ships you served in?
Well, most sailors know what a tin can's like. It's mostly submarine, but it's something that sits on the float that's on the ocean. And but the crew wasn't that tight. I didn't really get along with one of my superiors, but it was just a different type of ship, a different personality than the battleship. And then cruiser, I just came back from a reunion from that in Washington, D.C., and the whole ship was like the New Jersey, a tight ship. It was a friendly ship. It was one you enjoyed being on. And even the captain and on down on both those ships, the warden and the battleship, were fun ships to be on. What fun you wanted to serve on those two ships.
Okay, so going to back to civilian life, anything you want to say, or did the Navy have any impact on your life?
The Navy, I was just a kid getting out of high school. Really had no direction. Didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. And but the Navy, I think I learned a lot and matured a lot. Was in the Navy. I learned a lot. My parents did teach us, my brother and I, a lot when we were growing up. But I learned more about life in the Navy, as not just Navy life, but life in general.
So it did have a positive impact on your life.
Excuse me?
It did have a positive impact on your life.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, something
A lot of impact. Today I do things that I learned in the Navy that my wife will tell you that I can pretty much do things for myself. And sometimes I do too much, and she doesn't. She reminds me that she does things also.
Okay, so let's briefly talk about your transition to the civilian life. How'd that go?
Well, it wasn't, transition was quite short. I got out of the Navy, and within 3 months, I went to work for the City of Salinas Fire Department, which I retired from in 2005. After 32 years, I became an engineer in the fire service.
Okay, so that was your job in the fire department, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So military service is something you recommend for today's generation, would you say?
Yeah, I think the military is good experience for anyone who doesn't have any idea what they want to do. Military service would be a good place to start to find out what you want to do the rest of your life. And I wish sometimes that I'd stayed in the military. I retired after 10 years, or I quit, or got out after 10 years. But sometimes after talking to shipmates that I do know that retired military, sometimes I think about what would I be like or where I would be if I'd retired in the military, which was probably not a bad place.
Okay. So this is your first time back on the ship ever since you left?
Yeah, I haven't been aboard since the decommissioned ship.
Okay. What was your first reaction stepping back on board this ship?
Well, way back when we turned on the road to get, I told my wife, I said, there she is. It was just coming home.
Okay. You noticed a lot of changes, right?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of changes from the time that we can. I'm sure if someone came after the Korean War and looked at her when we commissioned her in '68, there'd be a lot of changes. And then as walking through the ship, some of the changes I've seen they were modernizations. I'm sure that the people in World War II or even the Korean War, when it was in service then, when we didn't have it like this, these guys had it nice. And then I looked at today, I was walking through the mess decks and pointing out things that we didn't have, like a salad bar or ice cream machine or ice cream box. None of that stuff was there. It's just the modernization of the ship it's changing, and the battleship changed with the crews that came on board.
All right.
I have one little story.
Oh, sure, go
We
ahead.
were doing full power runs, and we would bring the ship up in increments and knots to get full power. And I happened to have the opportunity during the daytime while we were going up, and actually at speed, I have a photograph of a rooster tail on the back of New Jersey. That the water, and this is not spray, this is water, 8 to 10 feet above the main deck as a rooster tail. And then I've got a photograph that you look beside the rooster tail and aft, and the wake is clear into the horizon. The water's still churning from the screws of Battleship New Jersey.
Going full speed, right?
Full speed, right around 32 knots.
It's impressive for this ship.
You look at the size of it. Also, one other little story. We were in dry dock in Philadelphia, and for some, I don't remember the reason, but there was during the World War II, there was a position called smoke watch. And it was set up for when you come into port because you weren't allowed to smoke. The stacks, the boilers, weren't allowed to make any smoke in some ports. So there was a smoke watch set up, and what he did is the stacks are divided into quarters. Each boiler has a quarter of a stack. And so his watch was, when they were pulling into port, he had a smoke watch, and he would radio down to main control which boiler was smoking. And from what I understand, whoever was smoking at the on Liberty bought the first round at the bar we were going to go. But that was for smoking in port on your boiler. You didn't want to do that. There's a ladder that goes up the forward stack. Myself and one of the guys that worked with me, we decided to go and see where the smoke watch was. I have been on top of the stacks, forward stack, standing upright on the Battleship New Jersey and looking down, and it is beautiful.
Okay. Any other stories?
That's about it.
Okay. I think you mentioned briefly about a reunion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How many reunions have you been to?
I've been to 5.
Okay. Now this is
5.
this is for the other 2 ships?
Yeah, this is not the other, just the warden. I have not been to, there are reunions for the battleship. I belong to the Battleship Association, just haven't been able to make any of their reunions yet.
Okay.
There's been several, but I have not had a chance to make those reunions. I intend to, but I just haven't had a chance to make that yet.
Okay. All right. So we're just about ready to close this interview. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just would say I hope the men, and I don't know if there's women on there or not, in the Gulf War, I hope they enjoy the ship as much as most of the guys that I work with
Yes,
enjoy it.
there was at least one female officer on board,
Okay.
at least in the 80s. Yeah, at least one.
Uh, She was a good ship, and the crews were always good.
Okay, she's said to be a lucky ship with always a good crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have ships with bad crews, and you have problems. We never had a problem on Battleship.
Right. It's the reason why she's the most decorated in the battleship in the U.S. Navy.
Well, yeah, and the guys on board were always the toughest.
Yeah. And in this interview, we are joined by Marvin's wife, Laquita. Yes. Yes. Thank you for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I was engaged to him when he joined the Navy, and because he didn't consult me, he just went to a meeting and joined. It was Vietnam, and we were engaged to be married, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't trust you. So I broke the engagement when he came home from Guam, and ran into him 10 years later outside of the fire department. So we've been married 41 years now, and the Navy changed him. It made him into the man he is today, the man I fell in love with 41 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, great story.
And I'm very proud of him. I tease him because he went from a Navy uniform to a fire department uniform, and out of retirement, 5 years later, he decides to put another uniform on and drive a historic trolley in the county of Tuolumne, California. But he likes uniforms, and I'm proud of him.
Okay. All right, it's very good. Okay, well, if there's nothing else to say, I guess we could wrap it up for now. All right, so once again, my name is Hugh Sung, assistant with the Oral History program on the Battleship New Jersey here in Camden, New Jersey, and today is October 14th, 2017. And once again, our interview guest is Marvin Minor. And once again, Marvin, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your service, and welcome back home on the Battleship New Jersey. So this interview will be preserved and kept here in the Oral History Department, but also copies would be sent to institutions such as the New Jersey State Library, Library of Congress, for safekeeping as well as for prosperity for future generations, because we're thinking maybe people 10, 20, maybe 100 years from now, long after we're gone, would be watching and listening to this and knowing the story that you just said, as well as many others. Also, you will be getting a copy as well for your safekeeping, too.
Thank you.
All right. So, once again, my name is Hugh Sung, signing off. And once again, thank you very much, Marvin, and thank you very much, Laquita.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, once again, good afternoon. It is October 14th, 2017. We're now in the post-interview process of today's interview with Marvin Minor. And we are down on the third deck on the Battleship New Jersey in Broadway, and he is going to talk about his duties here on the ship, as well as what all this equipment is all about. So take it away, Martin.
Okay. Being a BT or engineering, you had to know what was in the engineering spaces. There were other guys that handled this called the oil gang. Anyways, what we're looking at here are the valves that open and close when we fuel the ship. Each one of these control the opening and closing of the valves to take on fuel for the ship. There are several panels aboard the ship here. This is just one of them, to where when we were taking on fuel, either underway or in port, this would tell us how full that tank is, and we could shut it off, drain it, or open it up again for fueling later on if we wanted to maybe not top it off right now, move to something else, and top that one off and then come back to this. Most of these have a tank, a large tank, and they fill the others We have one tank that was for the overflow we would wash. So what would happen is just say, for instance, this is your main tank, and the others fill off of it. You'd fill these, and then fill this one last. And then you could control all the valves, and then you had a sound power phone that you would actually talking to the people up where the fuel is coming into the ship. And this is how we fuel the ship.
All right, continue, Martin.
You know, on this side, anytime you empty a fuel tank to maintain ballast and how the captain wanted the ship to ride, you had to flood the fuel tanks. So you can flood the fuel tanks, and if you're in battle, if say you're listing one way or the other, you can actually flood the fuel tanks to level the ship out again. Underway in normal time, normal steaming, you empty out a fuel tank, you didn't leave it void, you filled it with water, seawater. And then when you get ready to take on fuel again, you had to open these valves up and actually blow the water out of the fuel tank so you could take on fuel again. You're always just injecting your oil for water sediment, and there was ways of getting rid of water in the oil through filters or vents. But this is to maintain the ship's balance and underway, how the captain wanted to run the boat. If he wanted, if he wanted it, a lot of times he would run it forward, depending on the seas, a little heavy in the forward end or heavy in the aft end, depending on what was going on. This is how we flooded the fuel tanks, right here.
All right, we're continuing our interview with Marvin Minor, and we are now in one of the ship's fire rooms, correct? Is that how you say it? Okay, and Marvin's now going to talk about what happens here. So take it away, Marvin.
This is the check level. If you look at ships, they have decks. In the engineering, you have levels. And this happens to be the upper level of the fire room. This is the check level. What these valves do is maintain the water we call it a steam drum, but it's actually full of water, or half full of water. And I was just looking at this. There's something that's missing here, and it's a voice tube. Instead of yelling at each other or having a headset on talking to each other, there was a tube that came up with a brass bell on it, and it went down below to the firing level, and you could talk to the top watch through that tube. You've probably seen it in old ships. The Titanic, I've seen that on the Titanic, but they're hauling into a tube. They're called voice tube. And there was one here that we could have communications with the firing level. But these valves maintain the water in this drum. There's a large drum here. And this is the gauge. It's called a sight glass gauge. And it tells us how much water is in this tube, in this drum. And you always wanted to keep it just above half. If you look here, there's a gauge, there's increments on this brass. There was a light behind it that shined through this, and this was actual water that's inside the boiler that you were watching. And you wanted to maintain that level about an inch above the center. With it that way, you never wanted it to get up into this topper one, because what would happen is you'd send water to one of the engines, whoever you're supplying, and you put water in the engine and destroy the engine with water. But this is called the check level. Quite hot up here, probably in the neighborhood of 105 to 115 degrees up here. And you stood up here, and the only way to turn these valves, you just couldn't turn the valve like you can here today. Is put the water pressure on it. We had a thing called a crow's foot. It was actually like a V on about a 3-foot long bar with forks went down inside here, and you could actually, that's how you turned these. You couldn't turn these when these were under pressure. There's no way, plus they were too hot. So we had this thing called a crow's foot, and we actually stood checks leaning against this rail like this, reaching out and moving the checks as we need water or not need water to shut the valve off. And you only move this just an inch or two either way. That valve is that sensitive. and you could actually maintain the water by like driving your car and down the highway. You just move your steering wheel just a little bit to keep yourself in the middle of the road. And when you're underway and things are going just fine, just a couple of inches either way would control the water.
Action.
Okay, this is the what we're looking at here. This blue tank, pretty sized tank here, is they call the deaerating feed tank. You just can't put cold water into a hot boiler, so the water needs to be heated. So this water is heated to just below boiling, but it's under pressure, about 15 to 16 psi. Atmospheric pressure is 14.7, so we pressurize this a couple psi above atmospheric pressure. Even though it's 600-700 degrees, it still maintains water. Anything other than that, it would turn to steam. We don't want steam, we want water. So to maintain this water, we keep it above the pressures. If this tank was to fail, with the about little over 4,000 gallons of water that's in it, it would turn to steam so quick, no one in this fire room would survive steam. It would actually cook you in place. Okay, we're at the firing level. There are two levels. There's it's called the saturated side, and over here is the superheated side. The saturated side brings it up to steam that's got some water in it. The steam goes into this. There's a fire in here. The steam goes up in the tubes up above us. It goes over to the other side where they actually heat it up so high there is no moisture. It's called dry steam for the main propulsion to work efficiently. Each one of these, there's 5 here. They're called burners. And how these operate? Oh, there's a one here. I didn't see this. This is it's called a burner barrel. And what it is, there's a nut on the end, there's 2 pieces. It should be a burner plate inside. This burner plate happens to be this is a 15, so it's a very small hole. Generally under steam you ran with a 23 in here, not a 15, but this will work for what we're doing. But it is if you look at the end of the tube, it's actually a tube inside of a tube. And if you look at the burner plate, it's got a cross hatch on it, and that forces the fuel that's coming down this tube to spin.
I'm just going to get a close-up look at it. I'm just going to get a close look at it, so you don't mind just holding it in place. Alright. That's good. Alright, you can continue.
Okay. You put it on a little tighter than that.
Okay.
This goes in the hole, and the bail holds it in place. There. This is the supply oil. In these boilers we use heavy diesel oil. This one actually turns the burner on. And this is it's called the air register. You open the air register up, and the doors open up, because inside this kit, is called the air casing. It's actually hollow. There's about a 2-foot gap between this wall and the interior of the boiler. It's about that wide. And so the boiler is actually surrounded by air. You open this up, air forces into the firebox, the oil is ready to go, pull the valve down, oil goes into the firebox, and it starts spinning. And when it starts spinning, centrifugal force and those 4 little cuts in that burner tip make a cone. So you can actually look into this right here. Instead of seeing just oil shooting in, you can actually see a fire cone like you would at the back end of a rocket. And this is how this burner works. It atomizes the oil into a spinning rotation, and it atomizes and burns all the fuel. So it's atomized and then added air to it. When you change it, you shut it down. Okay, these are periscopes, and not like a submarine. These actually go up and have mirrors inside the stack. So we can, down here, we can see if we're smoking or not, and adjust our force draft blowers. You want to spin around a little bit, and I'll show you the control of the force draft blower. This controls the valve that controls the force draft blowers. On the back of these boilers are 3 force draft blowers, and what it is like having putting 3 fans on your cooking stove. It adds a whole lot of air and a lot of air pressure. And this controls the speed. The steam going to, they're steam powered, so this controls the speed and the steam going to those boilers. You can slow them down or speeding them up. The faster you go, the less smoke you make. And that's what these periscopes are for over here. So you look in there because you don't want any smoke. In World War II, there was a watch that was stood, especially when you're going in port. It's called a smoke watch. And he would keep an eye. He would go up on the stack, on the after forward stack. There was a spot for him to stand, and he would notify main control which boiler was smoking. The boiler that was smoking most, or the only one that was smoking, that crew had to buy the first rounds when they went on liberty. So you didn't want to make any smoke at all, especially in port. Underway was a little more difficult, but you still didn't want to make any smoke because the captain did not like smoke on his launch. Okay, the top watch, or the senior petty officer on the watch, this is his position to send his watch. He could move around the fire room, but his regular position was right here. What we're looking at here is called the annunciator. This is shaft speed. This fire room here controls 2 shafts, and whatever side they were running on, if you're running on port shaft or if you're running on both shafts, you could actually fire the engine room or the whole system from this one boiler. Because they wanted to go to full speed, we were sort of a early warning here. We'd see them going before so we could react to a speed change up or down from main control so we wouldn't be surprised of the speed change. So this is actually an early warning system to either bring the steam up or get ready to bring the steam up or get ready to lower the amount of steam that we're going out. It's always 600 pounds, but you only had a window of about 35 psi from too much to too little. So you had to have maintain that window with your steam pressure. So you could, if you went to 617, you'd actually lift safeties. If you drop down to 580 or 585, you'd actually lose the lights. The generators wouldn't work anymore. You still have propulsion, but the lights would go out. So you had to maintain that window for proper operation of the engineering plant. Okay, if you're an engineer, you see all these valves. You knew exactly where each one of them went and what it was for. So they're in the fire rooms down here. Everybody down here, from the top watch down to the messenger, had to know by number what the valve meant. You see these tags. We didn't have tags on. But there's valve numbers, and the top watch would say secure valve AS16. And that person who he was talking to knew exactly where AS-16 was in the dark. So it wasn't just all the lights on. We've actually had the lights go out and have to turn some valves off and things when I was on board the New Jersey. And so by knowing what you're looking for and where you're at, you can actually complete the job even in the dark. And this was a requirement for working down here. You actually had to draw where all these pipes go to and come from.
Okay, just going to pan around. All right, and you can continue, Marvin.
Okay.
All right, as soon as you're ready.
Okay. Remember up in the firing level, we looked at a big blue tank? Well, right here is these are called booster tanks. They take a suction off that tank and bring the pressure, a head pressure, to the feed tank. They're over here. There are three of them. There's three booster pumps and there's three feed pumps. One, you could run one at a time, or you could run two or all three, depending on your speed. The higher the speed, the more pumps you needed. So these actually supply water to the boiler. What you're going to catch.
Thank you.
And it's all controlled by this valve. You turn it on, and then you can set your pressure, and it will maintain that pressure as long as you don't change the valve on top. And there was a crew down here, a crew of two, most generally, sometimes three, down here that maintained this lower level. And their job was to make sure that all the equipment was running right and make sure these pumps are the lifeblood to the boilers and the engines to New Jersey. And also, without steam, you didn't eat. Without steam, you didn't go anywhere. And with steam, you didn't take a bath or anything else. We had everything, the BTs or the snipes, even the machinist mates, always said that we had to be here for the ship to function. And if we didn't make steam, the ship didn't function. Okay, New Jersey has 4 screws, or 4 shafts. The screws are propellers on the end, but how we get power to those are called shafts. This shaft is the longest shaft on New Jersey. It weighs the exact same, has the exact same weight as the shortest shaft. This shaft here is about 500 feet long. The shortest one, before it goes out the outside the ship, is something like 27 to 30 feet long. So that shaft weighs the same as this 500 feet long shaft. And what it is the thickness of the metal. Also, the shorter shafts are thick metal, but inside they have a ballast for getting it to weigh right. They have a ballast inside, so they can add or take out, make sure that the shafts weigh the same. If you didn't have the shafts weighing, the engines would work harder. So all these engines will work exactly the same. One engine can, on the Battleship, is set up. One engine can run all 4 shafts just by cross-connecting and knowing where these valves are.